I struggle traveling for long periods of time. I haven't gotten good at it yet. And I think in the phase of business that we're in, until maybe years from now, where like we truly feel like we can leave the business for a week or two and be okay.
Yeah.
Right now, it's still too much to walk away from for like a week and not have it constantly on your mind or be answering messages or, needing to post like all the things. So I probably worked a solid hour, 2 hours each day in the morning or throughout the day. It was nice. It was nice to see family and hang out with family, but it's just not my cup of tea to sit around all day or do. Like, it's just.
I know you guys had a lot of activity too and fun things,
We did.
but then you had a lot of like chill time.
Yeah.
Becca's like, I'm going for a walk. We just got here and saying, and you have to take that space. Like for me, if it's around, especially if I'm staying in someone's house, I can't imagine that. Honestly, I'd have to like go and take multiple breaks or just like go to the grocery store or something. But yes, I agree with you on long travel. I much prefer home routine and my own stuff, right? So anyways, we are going to dive into hormone health today, talking about DHEA and cortisol, and share a little bit of insight into when you might consider supplementing with DHEA and when you would not want to, and some of the side effects that can happen. And I know Becca talks about this a lot. I've talked about it a handful of times. When we're thinking about hormones, when you put something in, it doesn't just stay as DHEA, for example. So we're going to get into that. And it's like Plinko, or what's the Connect 4 almost, right? You're putting things in and sometimes it's not going in the direction that you want. And there can be a lot of value and insight into testing before you start supplementing, because DHEA is a common supplement people will take over the counter, but it's still technically a hormone.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because the hormones that you're able to get over the counter, so like progesterone has to be prescribed, testosterone has to be prescribed, estradiol has to be prescribed in most cases, like adequate doses of estradiol.
All right, if you're dealing with water retention, you're waking up puffy, your ankles or your wrists are really swollen, or you can't get your rings off, and maybe you're even dragging throughout the day, no matter how much water you drink, there's actually a good chance that you're not actually hydrating properly.
Exactly, because water alone is not enough. You need electrolytes, you need sodium, potassium, magnesium, because those things actually pull water into your cells. Otherwise, you're basically just flushing it out and wondering why you're still tired, you're still bloated, and you're still sluggish.
But here's the thing, most electrolyte supplements out there aren't helping you in any way, because a lot of them contain things like natural flavors, food dyes, and maltodextrin, which can irritate your gut. And these things can also spike your blood sugar when you're trying to heal.
That's why we both started using Buoy. It's super simple, just trace minerals and electrolytes in liquid form. No flavors, no colors, no sugar, no sweeteners, and you squeeze it into whatever you are drinking. Water, coffee, tea, smoothies, you name it.
And it's clinically backed by science too. So studies have shown that Buoy helps you hydrate better, 64% better in fact, and that's data coming from key blood and urinary markers, not just marketing fluff. And honestly, you can feel the difference. I've had many clients tell me their digestion's improved, they have less headaches, and they're better energy throughout the day.
And Buoy isn't just for people that go to the gym all the time and sweat a bunch. They actually offer a 35% lifetime discount for anyone that's struggling with chronic illnesses. Things like POTS, Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, chronic migraines, and every autoimmune condition. They're really committed to making better hydration accessible to people who need it most.
I actually throw it in my coffee every morning because it's such an easy upgrade. You don't even taste it, but you're definitely going to notice if you miss it.
If you're tired of playing hydration roulette and want something that actually supports your body, you've got to try Buoy. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to feel better faster. DHEA and pregnenolone are the main two hormones you can just like buy as a supplement, and they're two of those hormones that are going to potentially end up in other places, depending on how you metabolize hormones. So I don't know why that is the way it is, or why that is, how supplement companies or FDA or all of those things have decided on that. But a lot of people, because of that, when they see low DHEA or they see a post on DHEA or whatever it might be, they're like, oh, I need to go take DHEA. I can just order it. This says to take 20 milligrams, which is a very high starting dose. And you don't evaluate other things that could potentially be going on, your history, what other, symptoms you're having, other blood work markers. So we want to talk today about what DHEA is, what it reflects when you see it in blood work, what you want to test for. And then on top of that, if you should be taking it potentially, and what to watch for if you do decide to go down the route of taking it. So let's kind of talk through, what is DHEA and why you want to test, when you test for it, actually DHEA-S, which is the sulfated version of DHEA.
Yes. So some providers, I've heard this, really want to see both. They want to see DHEA, which is, think of this like spending cash, whereas DHEA-S, the sulfated version, is money in the bank. And so DHEA is your active hormone. It's made mostly by the adrenal glands. It converts quickly into estrogen and testosterone, which we'll get more into. And it can change fast based upon your stressors. So lack of sleep, if you've been sick, if you're overtraining, you're just in a high stress season. It also it best reflects what's happening right now, because this is the form your body is actually using. When we look at DHEA-S, which is what we're looking at on lab work, this is, again, the sulfated version. It's showing more of a baseline adrenal capacity. And so it's more reflecting that long-term adrenal output, what's been the stress on the adrenal glands. It's the same hormone, it's just parked within a sulfate group. And so again, that's going to be money in the bank. That's your storage form. That's your reserves. And this half-life is much longer than DHEA. So when you're running blood work, you might choose to run DHEA-S, or you might run both. You might run, because there's different calculations and things that you can do with, if you have both essentially markers. So again, we're going to think of DHEA-S here for today's topic as that long-term resilience reserve, and not just that quick stress hormone, which would be DHEA itself. And then DHEA-S versus cortisol. So we run AM cortisol, typically drawn before 9 a.m. And this is going to show us a snapshot in the moment, of course, of what your cortisol output is. And again, this could be based upon your blood sugar levels, right? Are you high? Are you low? That's going to inflict a difference in cortisol. Did you sleep well? Are you stressed? Do you have an active infection? I also tell people, think about when you go and you get your labs drawn. If you have a fear of needles, or you're nervous, or pass out, you don't like any blood work done, that could also skew it, because this is, again, in the moment. So cortisol is kind of like checking the weather today, whereas DHEA-S is looking at the climate trend over the past few years. So it's really interesting, right? When we look at some of these patterns, these correlations, and oftentimes we're seeing, in terms of low DHEA-S, this showing up after years of chronic stress, chronic illness or inflammation, under eating or overtraining, again, both big stressors to the body, glucocorticoid use, and menopause and aging. So there's a normal decline, but sometimes this can be exaggerated in menopause.
Yeah.
The joy of menopause.
I know. Menopause sounds so great after we talk about it all the time. I see it a lot. So like, we'll see a lot of women in their 50s where DHEA is maybe like 110, right? Not optimal, but not super low. And then I'll see other women, their DHEA is like 40 or 60, and that's extremely low. And so you'll definitely see a variance in terms of what is showing more fatigue of the adrenal system and the stress system, whereas people that are maybe a little bit more resilient have not undergone as much chronic stress. So low DHEA can similarly feel like low testosterone, because they're both androgen hormones. So you'll see a lot of times fatigue, poor stress tolerance, low libido, slower recovery from exercise, low mood, or kind of like a lack of joy for things, poor muscle tone and bone loss risk over time. So low DHEA, understand though, does not diagnose adrenal fatigue or like give you your adrenals are completely puttered out, they're not producing how they should. It basically just tells you like the system's been under strain for a period of time, right? That can mean a number of different things. So when do you evaluate? Do I supplement with DHEA? Because I think that it can have a place. I have seen it be very positive for a handful of clients. I will say, I think there are probably more people that do not tolerate it than do. That, in my personal experience, that is my N equals however many clients I've put it with. Right. There's probably a couple dozen clients that I've put it in with. And I've kind of veered away from putting it in more because of the number of negative reactions I've seen with it, unfortunately. And the nice thing, I hate to say nice thing, but like the positive of this is that you come off of it, the symptoms go away. Like it's typically not something that cascades this long term, because you usually start at a very low dose, and people that do not tolerate it typically know pretty quick that they don't tolerate it. Like they're either quickly seeing oily skin, acne pop up, really big mood shifts, things like that. But if you are seeing persistently low DHEAS, you are in menopause with symptoms where androgens are depleted, maybe there's an autoimmune condition. There's actually some decent research around lupus and DHEA use positively. So we've seen it benefit because we do know androgen hormones, testosterone included, does benefit the immune system. And so in those cases, it can be beneficial. Certain cases of low libido, specific fertility and endocrine protocols. I think that it's beneficial when it's replacing what is truly missing and you have addressed other things.
Yeah, before supplementing with DHEA, I would make sure that I'm supporting my adrenals and my stress overall, because DHEA is produced by your adrenal glands. So just to kind of back up here, especially for the menopause picture, right? As your ovaries are kind of going offline and they're like, hey, I'm out, we've done our job, good luck. Your adrenals will produce these hormones because then they convert into other hormones, right? So with DHEA, that converts into your androgens, testosterone or other androgens, and then that can also aromatize or convert into estriol and estrogen. So the body is smart, right? God designed us very intelligently, and there's a reason that this is something that you need, and it's a check engine light, I would say, like for your stressors, right? So I would be supporting with things like adrenal cocktails and maybe supplementing with some herbal adaptogens. I would be focusing on the foundations, what we talk about all the time with lifestyle, adequate sleep, training and recovery. A lot of people just focus on the training aspect. They don't focus on the recovery. So all of those things can help. And then obviously the underlying work of figuring out what is driving inflammation in my body or causing stress in my body, right? Because this can be not just a physical stressor, it can be, emotional stressors, it can be underlying infections, things that you're exposed to in your environment. So I think a lot of that matters. And then for me as a practitioner, when I choose to recommend it, it is very low and slow. So I know Dr. Carrie Jones, she talks about how the natural production endogenously is about 20 to 25 milligrams a day. Well, if you look at DHEA, you can get it 50 milligrams, 100 milligram, capsules. That's crazy, right? So I like a product called Biosom is generally what I start with, or there's other capsule forms, but it's 5 milligrams. And so you're starting there, you're seeing a response. If I don't have a negative reaction, okay, then I go up. But I personally don't take my clients above about 25 milligrams. I don't know if you do, but,
Nope.
More on the men's side of things. Like my husband's on 100 right now for a few weeks, and then he'll drop back to 50. So just, know that when you see something online, don't just take it for face value and think like, oh, more is better, because more is not always better, especially when it comes to hormones. And so let's talk about why, like when can this cause problems? So we look at a Dutch test on the androgen pathway. We like to see, where does this go? How does your body metabolize it? We metabolize DHEA and androgens pretty aggressively, and you can choose which way, like in our pathway, am I more androgenic? So this could be partially due to genetics, or it could just be the way that your body favors it showing up, whether or not you're taking exogenous DHEA or testosterone, right? You just might be a higher androgenic woman, and then you have some of these symptoms, as well. But some of the common side effects of taking this and turning it into androgens more aggressively would be irritability or agitation, oily skin, and acne. I've been sharing a little bit about, like, my preference is the 5-alpha androgenic pathway, and taking testosterone at a level that it's honestly, it's the starting dose, but that I feel good. I felt really good with. I was seeing positive benefits in the gym, my recovery, my libido, my energy. However, I was starting to get upper back acne and some acne on my face. I'm not going to have that because my appearance is very important to me. So I'm doing other things to support detoxification and to support my skin internally and externally. So there's ways that you can, obviously combat this if it's something that you feel really helps you in other symptoms. But a lot of times with hormones, we resolve a symptom or we see positive benefits, yet there is always a cost, right? No free lunch. Other things here would be hair thinning, more in the androgenic pattern. You might see hair growth too in places that you don't want. So maybe darker hairs on your chin or your lip or your sideburns, insomnia, or like a wired feeling. You can also see a cycle disruption here. And again, I would say, because if you're looking at that androgenic pathway, if it's filtering to testosterone and then it's aromatizing into estrogen, and you're not clearing your estrogen well, you become more estrogen dominant. So that's not a great thing either. So I think that when you are looking at your hormones, you always want to think about starting with your phase 3 detoxification, because you have to have your drains open so that phase 1 and phase 2, as they filter down, because DHEA is upstream, then you know that you're filtering it out of the body at a good rate, right? Essentially, if you imagine, we always talk about the sink and drain analogy, water coming in from the faucet, you want it draining out at the same pace so that you're not backing up the system and then, flooding the system, overflowing. And that's where you're going to start to see some negative, effects with these symptoms. But I would add to that more PMS, bloating, bitchiness, breast tenderness, those types of kind of estrogen dominant symptoms as well.
Yeah, that's why we love genetic testing too. I think that it can be so helpful to understand, does this person aromatize at a high rate? I'm a very strong aromatizer. And so I know I need to stay on DIM detox support because I'm taking testosterone. I really like how I feel on testosterone, but it will cause a lot worse. When I first started the higher dose testosterone and kind of just let it ride, I had horrible cramps and bloating leading into my period, which I never have. And so I know I'm pushing a lot of it to estrogen, which will happen with DHEA as well. So if you are someone that knows you have androgen sensitive conditions, maybe you have a history of PCOS, maybe you have active acne or hair loss issues or severe anxiety or, unexplained irritability, or you've gotten DHEA tested and it's not low, you may not want to bring in DHEA or testosterone, honestly, if you are someone that is predisposed to those things. That's where we really need to evaluate, okay, if testosterone is very low, but DHEA is moderate, maybe we do consider testosterone. But if you have the history of PCOS or acne or some of these things, maybe we need to bring in like spironolactone. Maybe we need to bring in, some aromatization to support with estrogen detox to make sure that we don't end up with the negative side effects.
Can you touch on spironolactone there for a moment? Because I know this is something that we've talked about. I just got it. I haven't started it yet, but I have it on hand, because if all of the measures that I'm doing to support detox and my internal and external skin health with good serums, microneedling, those types of things don't work, I am all for taking spironolactone. And I know that Dr. Rouzier actually talked about, for women experiencing hair loss, irregardless of the testosterone, that he likes spironolactone in menopause for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So something to understand is that your follicle's sensitivity to DHT. So DHT is basically like the really potent form of testosterone that can cause hair loss, that can cause acne. You experience it at two different levels. You experience it at a systemic level and a follicle level. And so a lot of people don't realize they measure DHT in their blood and it's not high, but then they're having hair loss, they're having acne. Think of your hair follicles and almost like the follicles of the skin as a separate organ than your body. It's like a different experience to DHT. And so some people are very sensitive to DHT at the follicle level, but they're not systemically sensitive to DHT. And so you're experiencing hair loss, but you don't actually have high DHT. So that's where spironolactone can be really helpful, because it blocks DHEA just at the follicle level. So you're not negatively getting low levels of testosterone if you're on testosterone, but your follicles aren't getting negatively affected by you taking testosterone, because you want the systemic benefit, you want the libido, you want the energy, you want the recovery, you want all of those things, but you don't want the negative side effects of the follicle levels might be really sensitive to it. So that's where I really like spironolactone. And it's usually you start at 50 to 100 milligrams. It is very cheap. It is very low side effects. Like if there are a handful of medications I am actually a fan of, spironolactone, LDN, maybe thyroid medication, depending on the person.
Yeah.
And we've done everything else. Like sometimes people just really can't get their thyroid back online later on in life, and perimenopause, menopause, and fair. Like I'd rather just bring in a medication they tolerate and brings them up to levels, because the thyroid's so important. That's probably it. I don't know if you have other ones, but like I would say those three are kind of the.
Yeah, I would say for spironolactone, this is something that I've actually had conversations with clients who have teen daughters with very intense acne, cystic acne. Maybe they have the PCOS pattern, insulin resistance and whatnot. And what my main point to them was, this is better than birth control. And you want to get ahead of acne scarring, right? Like I had gross, like bad acne as a teenager. And I went on birth control, and I really wish that I would have not done that and I would have gone on spironolactone instead. If I had a daughter, that's what I would be choosing, because the side effects and longer term effects of birth control are much greater than the spironolactone. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw in here, because I know that sometimes like teens are hard, number one, because they're with their, friends, they're going out, maybe they're driving now, they're not with you all the time. You can't control everything for them. They're typically not great at drinking water adequately, choosing, high quality, unprocessed foods. Like, I know what it's like to be a teenager. Like, we have to be realistic, right? So I would much rather, again, painting the scenario that was me as my daughter, give her spironolactone than just say like, okay, let's take a bunch of these herbs, because she's not going to probably be consistent with supplements and not going to be consistent enough with diet. And I wouldn't want her to resent me down the line for having like acne scarring because I didn't, help her. So that's just one thing I wanted to put in there. I know it's unrelated to this podcast, but something to consider if you are, dealing with a teen who you are trying to help, and maybe she is doing, things, but it's just not enough. It's not enough chemical pressure essentially to help that skin microbiome. Because when we think about the skin microbiome and insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction, liver dysfunction, there's a lot, right, that goes into it, starting with the gut. We always say skin is like a window to the inside. And so if they aren't either able to do gut healing protocols or work with somebody, or they're just really inconsistent or whatever, that could be, a nice alternative. While again, you still push and support on the other foundational things. But that brings us to a perfect segue into things that we would want to fix before reaching for DHEA. So as I mentioned before, stress on the body, right? Are we overtraining? Are we not recovering well? Are we in a chronic calorie deficit or protein deficit? Do we have a lot of inflammation going on in our body? Do we have a lot of infections, gut issues, digestive, symptoms, or not, right? Because there can be infections underlying driving inflammation without the person having crazy symptoms. And I know that sounds strange, but we see it all the time, because your body, I was listening to a podcast today with Huberman, and they were actually talking about when you eliminate and you excrete, we are made up of so much bacteria that half of your stool is bacteria and microbes. And that's why we do stool testing, because we can see, okay, what are we passing through? How heavy is this? How, there's normal levels, commensal is what we call them, like that we expect, because we all have shit, literally. And then there's overtly high levels, and those are more on the infectious side, driving a lot of this inflammation. Micronutrient depletion. So we think about B vitamins, magnesium, zinc. I would add here like potassium. So anything that's really going to be nourishing in terms of minerals and electrolytes to your adrenals, and then making sure that you have the appropriate cofactors for your body to function right in terms of like thyroid, as you mentioned before. That's where I think of, okay, selenium, iodine, all those things matter here as well. And then unaddressed cortisol dysregulation. So I think that the Dutch test is another valuable piece here, because it shows us that cortisol pattern. We want to see a good cortisol awakening response. So we wake up, we get a rise in cortisol, and then it slowly lowers throughout the day. We don't want to see, on the flip side of that, melatonin, right? So sometimes we'll see with some of these more androgenic cases, insulin resistance, a lot of inflammation, higher melatonin in the morning, and they're dealing with sleep issues, insomnia, right? Like, I don't know how people with poor sleep function long term, because I know for me right now, like last night, Ethan finally slept 8 hours, and I am like feeling it today. Like I feel, on cloud nine, because sleep is so, so important. So just remember this: if the body doesn't feel safe, it's not going to invest in hormones that support vitality. It's got other things to do. It's survival mode, right? It's thinking about your blood pumping, you blinking, you breathing. It's not thinking about adequate hormones. And I would add to this, you can't build hormones without the right nutrients. So when we think about calorie restriction, chronic dieting, the use of GLP-1s, eating disorders, that all is going to negatively impact your hormones. And you're probably going to be the person that sees low levels across the board, but certainly low levels of the DHEA-S.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, instead of just supplementing, if you have low DHEA, I think it's a great marker to test. I love looking at DHEA-S. I think give a great picture of what potentially is going on in the adrenal function, since cortisol AM is just a snapshot, really. But why is it low? Is testosterone maybe a better option? Have you corrected the things that affect DHEA? And if you are considering that route, really evaluate your health history and what you've dealt with in the past to make sure that it feels like the right fit.